The federal government during the week hinted at a plan to rebuild Tudumbiri village in Igabi local government area of Kaduna State, which was accidentally hit by drone strikes by the Nigerian military in chase of terrorists. Vice President Kashim Shettima, who gave the hint, further disclosed that President Bola Tinubu has directed that the Pulako initiative should be kick-started in Kaduna State with a complete package, which includes houses, clinics, schools, veterinary clinics, empowerment initiatives, and solar energy, among others. Now, in Tudumbiri community, as a way of compensation for the destruction caused by the military tactical error which led to the loss of lives, the Vice President gave a hint after visiting the victims of the drone misfire at the Baraudiko Teaching Hospital in Kaduna State, where some of the casualties, most of whom are women and children, are receiving treatment. Now, about 85 people were killed in this strike. Meanwhile, the federal government has also directed the management of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, to mobilize and provide adequate support to the victims of the tragedy in Tudumbiri village, even as there are calls on rights for those who have been killed, including the injured. And of course, we'll now want to find out what all of this means. To help us better understand the issues thrown up by the compensation plan of the federal government, and especially the legal rights of the dead, including those who are living, we have joining us in the studio a human rights lawyer and activist, Abdul Mahmud, who is well known as the Great Oracle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening,
yes.
Nigerians.
And we also have joining us right here in the studio Jonathan Onoja, who's a security analyst and consultant to several security agencies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So, Abdul Mahmud, I come to you first, and I want to know, what are the best practices in times like this when there's a tactical error by the military, which is meant to protect civilians during this sort of insurgency, and there's this sort of incident like this? We've seen that happening previously in Nasarawa State, in Borno, and all of that. So in terms of compensation, what are the best practices and what are the legal rights of the dead, including of those who are living as a result of the pains?
Well, first, let me express my condolences to the people of Kaduna State, and generally, of course, to Nigerians for the loss. We're talking of 85, 86 Nigerians who unfortunately lost their lives, and also to those who are presently in hospital. I can only but wish them speedy recovery. When we talk about compensations for the dead, perhaps for the living as well, our starting point would be section 33 subsection 1 of the Constitution, which deals with the right to life. But incidentally, you cannot begin to enjoy those benefits that are attached to the right to life until except that happens. That happens. You cannot go to court, for example, and ask the court, because so and so thing or things have happened to me, please protect my right to life. The right to life can only be protected to the extent that we're dealing with loss or loss of lives. The issue of compensation generally flows from a different realm of law, which deals with tort, where actions, default or inactions result in the death of an individual or injury, for example, under the Fatal Accident Act. All that inures, to the dead or to the injured would, of course, be compensation. You cannot pay compensation, except demands are made against the tortfeasor, the individual who has committed, what is being complained about. And we have had it increasingly, I think 18 times in the past 6 years, of disastrous military airstrikes resulting in the types of death that we're having. But I can't recall at any point in time where families of individuals have approached our court, to ask for compensation. That's one. Two, And I think the approach that the present government is taking, at the risk of not praising them, in the context of public policy approach, in the context of public policy response, to the ghastly crisis that we are seeing, we are seeing in Kaduna is the best. For me, as a human rights lawyer, the first thing I want to do is to rush to the court and ask the court, please protect the right to life of these individuals whose lives, that have already been lost, either on the basis of Section 33 of the Constitution, pursuant to the Fundamental Right Enforcement Procedure rules and all that. But we know how the wheels of justice grind in our country, and we see it from some of the approaches that we made to the NSAS panel, for example, in 2020. Except for Lagos State that has paid compensations to a few families. I can't recall any state in any of the 27 states that had judicial panels that have paid compensations to families. So we are dealing with the realm of human rights law, and we are also dealing with the realm of the law of tort. Like I always say, flowing from the principle, every Nigerian knows, particularly those of us who are sophomore students of law in faculties, ibi jus, ibi remedium. Where there is a right, there must be a remedy.
All right, very interesting perspective, and I bring you in, Jonathan. Talk to us about this tactical error. I mean, the military, in terms of the soldiers, for example, were all out to pursue terrorists to secure the communities. Unfortunately, there was this tactical error. But of course, what Nigerians are saying is that the errors have become too much. In terms of the federal government's compensation plan right now, how do you juxtapose it with what has happened in the past?
All right, thank you so much. First and foremost, let me also extend my condolences to the families, the victims of the last week Kaduna, I can call it war crimes, because we've not seen it this very bad that our military, who expectedly to protect our territory, end up actually killing a citizen. SBM intelligence in February this year published a report and says that military mistakes operations have killed over 300 Nigerians. And between 2023 February till now, you can count so many incidences that have happened, and you can count from Nasarawa State, Niger, Kaduna, and all of, even in Adamawa, children were killed. So the calls for, a full-scale investigation into the last incident is in order. And I tell you that Nigerians are not unaware of the fact that civilians, regardless, do not have absolute immunity when it comes to attacks in all cases. But it is because of the incessant attacks by the military that Nigerians now see it as no longer an error. Rather, they tag it as a war crimes by the military. Because when it has happened and there are no remedies, it shows that there are things that actually is happening and nobody is saying anything about it. Take, for instance, talking about compensation today, and like our good lawyer has spoken, remember the 2002 Ikeja cantonment explosions. Recall that over 1,000 persons lost their lives. And where even government make promises 20 years after, these promises have not been fulfilled. And so Nigerians do no longer see what promise, what compensation that the federal government can give to a citizen that would truly be satisfying. In America, they have a compensation standard, which is called the solatia. They pay this solatia to individuals depending on the ranges of injuries incurred. But regardless, our system the Nigerian system as a whole don't even have a standing claims system that will address victims, or compensations. So we really don't talk about compensation in this instance. Rather, we should actually investigate, go further, go deep to investigate the root causes of this. Number one, we've looked at the budget that was presented, the 2024 budget. You see a whole lot, about 3-point-something trillion just for the security alone. And it shows that we're actually planning for more kinetic. Things like this will be happening in 2024. Rather than prioritizing the welfare of Nigerians, we keep procuring warfare. And this warfare have, over the years shown that we don't even have the capacity. and the technical know-how to manage this. And that is why the international community have even refused.
We're buying.
Even if you go to international communities, some of them have refused to even give us.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to say, because there was this Leahy law in the US, the Leahy law, which led the Obama administration then saying that they didn't want to sell lots of arms and ammunition to us because the Nigerian army had not shown that it has enough capacity to protect the rights of civilians while it is engaging in such operation. And it looks like we don't do lots of, we don't invest much in training people who handle those armaments.
Of course, we know we have a lot of conflict. And at the same time, we have rules of engagement. And let me tell you something. The rules of this rules of engagement entails good intelligence, planning, and of course, the rules of engaging the people. We really don't see this when it comes to, loss of conflict and engagement of operations. But when you see, what you see the Nigerian military does is, even at the street, on the street, the general can be driving by, and maybe if he mistakenly hits just a motorcyclist, he does not stop. He sees that he's right. He does not stop to say, "Hi, I have committed a crime."
Well, he sees it more of as a bloody civilian.
He sees that you are nothing. So this is where this whole idea started coming from, and we did not put it into checks until you can see a Nigerian general can just come and say, "Who are you?" and he shoots you on sight, and nothing happens. This is how we began having this idea that we will always come up and say it was a mistake and nothing will happen. Look at what happened last week. Is not different than what happened on April 15th, 2014 in the Nanya bomb blast. Any terrorist could have come and said it was a mistake. I was trying to test what the Gagat have actually over the years prepared.
Planning.
So look, we need to. There must be consequences for compromise. So, in a sane society, if the chief of the army staff, if the son was involved, if any of the senator's son was involved, if the governor's son was involved, if the president's son was involved, by this time, we would have had a chief of army staff that would have peacefully resigned, and now we'll be talking about prosecution.
Well, that's not in Nigeria. Abdul, I just want to point one thing now before you say what you want to say. It's for the fact that our generals, our military generals, have been getting away with so much over the past years. And now people are also saying that the judicial inquiry that should be put into place should not be driven by the military itself, because it looks like it's the military that wants to probe itself in this instance. Go ahead.
Let me chip into what my friend and colleague has expressed here. Increasingly, we are having tactical errors in the military administration of warfare, of conflicts in our country. I remember a few years ago when some Nigerian army officers tactically found themselves, in Cameroon or somewhere in Nigeria.
Yeah.
The phrase, tactical withdrawal was also thrown into it. Now we are seeing tactical errors. It raises fundamental problems about intelligence, about reconnaissance, about contact between the military and civil society. If the military intelligence discovered that terrorists were entering this community, at least intelligence or reconnaissance should have told them that these terrorists are pulled out from the community, in the first place. A failure of reconnaissance and intelligence is what we are seeing at the moment. I worry when we talk about investigation. Who is going to investigate who? Is it the military investigating itself, or the judiciary, a judicial panel, perhaps headed by a retired judge, investigating the military? Well, if it is the latter, I have no problem with that.
But what are the best practices within this instance? Yeah. Should it be left to the military alone?
No, the military cannot investigate itself. Whoever is charged with responsibility of setting up a judicial panel, here I think is the president, would have to be nuanced in the way he selects members of the panel itself, because we are talking of military operations. we are talking of intelligence, we're talking of military civil relationship or relations and all that. All of this will have to feed into the membership of the panel so that we get to the root, to the bottom of what really happened. Like my friend said, you know, consistently we've been having failure of state institutions, failure of military practices, failure of paramilitary practices that have, you know, become impunity in themselves because we don't have consequences in our country. These things happen over and over again,
yeah,
and people are not punished.
If I'm to chip in here, there's this talk within the military circles. I've spoken with some of my friends who are in there that if there's an independent panel that's set up by the president to actually investigate this, that this may lower the morale of troops at the front line, and it may make some people say, okay, if we are being punished for wanting to protect the same civilians, then we also will withdrawing so that terrorists will be overrunning communities.
I agree, Sumner. One thing a nation state should not allow itself to collapse to is to allow a segment or institution of state to blackmail it into inaction, you know, and that's what military officers are trying to do here. They are subject to laws of our country. They are subject to laws. Even in their military operations, the military operations are also subject to laws, you know, and all that. So what we are looking at will be a failure of response to what rules, regulations dictate, you know, and if individuals are found culpable, they should be punished, you know, they should be punished. But if the state is blackmailed to the extent that it becomes inactive, it refuses to take action, we should be very careful about the way the airstrike is now ethnically framed. You know, ethnically framed. We find former governors who could not control their states, you know, who under their rulership of the state and rulership, you know, people were killed, you know, now visiting these areas, you know, to show empathy, to show sympathy.
Are you talking of former governor Nasser Rufai here?
We've seen, you know, we've seen photos.
Well,
we've seen photos.
Of course.
We've seen 58.
Well, he's a political leader.
We've seen 58 senators of northern extraction. Look, we are collapsing back to the same fault lines.
And one would wonder if the senators shouldn't have been calling for an inquiry or setting up an investigative panel rather than making it look like it's sectional or it's a northern senators thing or a southern. So if it happens in the south next time, the southern senators will... I thought senators were meant to be for the whole country.
Of course, that's
well. Let's come to you, Jonathan. I mean, Jonathan, let's talk about how critical it is for us to understand military operations in the country. Now, from the DHQ statement that was earlier sent out, they said that this Tudunbiri community is a place where terrorists have been, you know, going about over time, and that in this instance, terrorists mixed up with civilians, and so there were true drone airstrikes that were sent out, and of course they got entangled with civilians. So is there no way of reconnaissance? I know that the Nigerian Army started its own aviation unit separately from that of the Air Force. Is there no way that they could have seen so much, although they are using drones, that these were not necessarily the sort of terrorists that they had been expecting, because they were kids? I mean, young people and women who were more in that population than even men.
Look, like I told you earlier, it's because we lack good intelligence, we lack planning, and like I said, we don't have a clear rules of engagement. Otherwise, if I'm going to put the questions out to the military, the same question here is that on that same Sunday, when this happened, did they have an intelligence that they were, you know, terrorists in that zone? Well, did they have, you know, because
that's what they said. I mean, this happened around 10 p.m.
Good. If they really have this intelligence, now, how many terrorists were killed in this whole saga? Because we just got to know that 85 persons, and these 85 persons have not been identified to be terrorists. Profiling. Do you understand? Have not been identified to be, this is terrorist, or the so numbers are terrorist. All we have seen is that, all we have heard is that Nigerians, and, you know, fantastic enough, and so although it is so heart-throbbing, where we have a man losing over 30 families, 30 members of his families. Now, if we have a man that can identify about 30 members of his family. Now, give plus or minus, we're now left with about 55, and the others injured. Those injured are in the hospital receiving treatment. We can see, young, innocent children on beds. And then if we talk about terrorists, where are those terrorists that were targeted for this operation? At least one or two should have been killed, as for a reason where people cannot begin to believe this operation that, look, it was actually meant for terrorists, but unfortunately hit part of, civilians that are not combatants. Yeah. And so we are not actually deploying these gadgets, is so well that we can, look, these drones have sophisticated cameras. They can tell you the numbers of people you are hitting, the people you are hitting, you are seeing them. And look, this happened twice. When the first one came, there was a denial until the second one came.
Yeah, and people rushed to actually help those that were injured.
So when we are talking about engagement, it has shown that this operation have actually shown a classical weakness on the part of the military. They have lost the sense of intelligence. Otherwise, look, the natives, the best of intelligence rest with the natives. If you want to get the best of intelligence, go to where the natives are concentrated. And why this is upgoing, this surveillance are upgoing there, you could actually have some, tete-a-tete with some of these natives and then discuss with them. They will give you details of where these guys are even staying. Then you can have a definite mapping of this place and strike. But you striking the whole community that you want to kill terrorists does not actually confines with the best international practice.
Yeah, but that's not also to say that in times past we haven't seen where terrorists infiltrate civilian populations.
We have not seen where these mistake drones have killed 200, 500, 300 terrorists in the bush. We have not seen that.
Well, we have a problem.
People should understand this simple intelligence. We have not seen where your mistakes drones or mishaps killed 200 terrorists in the bush or in the forest. It is people that are carrying out their religious, engagement. Did you see them with AK-47? Don't you see children? Did you think these children? Okay, if for instance, these children are minor, for any reasons, if their fathers or their mothers are even terrorists, don't you even have an understanding that these children have a right to life?
Well, these are tough decisions for all of us to actually answer.
The interesting thing,
yeah,
we're talking about compensation.
Yeah,
I just saw a clip that was shown, and it's troubling to me. And it speaks to the type of compensation I think consistently government organized in our country. We saw the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria sharing money, in the world.
Well, maybe just to provide succor before the main thing.
What kind of succor?
Well, the
best you can do is, gentlemen, this we must first test the psychology. We must have to have the mental and physical check on this commander.
I think that the Vice President was actually very wrong in doing that. It could have been someone else that would have been doing that, but not him. Because how much
are you going to give to the family? Yeah, the man that lost about 30 members of his family. Yeah, you give him money. It shows.
Those are the things that we say about politicians. They actually don't think before they do.
So unfortunate. And like I raised initially, the 2002 Ikeja cantonment explosion. Do you know that 20 years after, there are people, victims' families that are still begging for the promises that the government made to them? Some of these promises are not being fulfilled. That is why Nigerians no longer believe in the promises of Nigeria's government. All you need to do is, gentlemen, this is the commander in charge of this, and the military have ethics. They need to prosecute or rather investigate.
Yeah, that's what we're actually not even hearing. Who were those who ordered the strikes? Nobody's actually saying anything.
And this is where I say, look, in the military, that's what we call center forward. You must always be ready to get information from your superior. So there must be there's a chain of command. And how did this happen? It's where even the commander-in-chief of the armed forces must be involved, which is the president.
I guess that's why people are requesting for an independent panel.
That is why he himself has to even be probed, because he's the commander-in-chief. And so every investigation must start from him down to the chief of army staff and also to the commanders.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to go on a short break. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. It's a heated session here on the Kaduna bombings and, of course, the federal government's plan to actually provide compensation and, of course, long-term initiatives that could help bring succor to the lives of those who are still alive and then, of course, lead to some sort of strong compensation for the families of the dead victims. Stay with us as we go on this short break and come back for more. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching This Week, and I'm Samna Sambo. And of course, we're still reviewing all that has happened concerning the bombing in Kaduna State on Sunday, where about 85 persons got killed. And of course, we're reviewing the federal government's compensation plan. And of course, the succor being provided by the National Emergency Management Agency for those who are still in hospitals, and of course families who are devastated by the attack in Tudunbiri community in Igabi local government area of Kaduna State in northwest Nigeria. And of course I still have with me here in the studio Abdul Mahmud, who is a human rights lawyer and activist. He's also known as the Great Oracle. And then of course we also have with us here Jonathan Onoja, who's a security consultant and a public affairs commentator. Thank you, gentlemen, for still being with us here. And we'll now go on to the next story, where concerned Northern Forum lawyers have vowed to institute legal action against the federal government, demanding the payment of adequate compensation for the victims of Tudunbiri bombed community by the military airstrikes in Kaduna State. Over 120 villagers were affected while celebrating Maulud on that Sunday night. Now, speaking on behalf of the Lawyers Forum, Barrister Nafiu Abubakar explained that the families that suffered irreparable loss as a result of this unfortunate incident deserve justice. Nafiu, who spoke while addressing newsmen in Kaduna on Saturday, that's earlier today, urged the federal government to take immediate and decisive actions to ensure a thorough and independent investigation into the incident. The forum, with over 600 members, extended their deepest condolences to the families who lost their loved ones during the tragic incident. And so, gentlemen, we've seen some lawyers like yourself, Mahmud, trying to say, look, this thing cannot just be allowed to happen. These mistakes have been so much. And some of the sentiments that some of them were saying over time is that most of these mistaken airstrikes and bombings have been happening more in the north. Of course, it's the north that we have terrorism and insurgency more. So where else did we expect this to happen? But they have decided to sue the federal government if there's no independent investigation that satisfies the yearnings of Nigerians on this matter. What do you make of that?
Well, I welcome the approach that they are considering to take. It's a good development. It sits with my conception and what I do for a living, public interest litigation. Interestingly, the FREP rules, does not shut the door against people that our court will naturally call individuals that do not have local standi. The FREP rules allows us to deepen public interest jurisprudence on the basis of our interest, and on the basis of rights of Nigerians, rights of Nigerians that have been violated. But I also worry here. My worry stems from the attitudes of our court to matters of damages and compensation, for example, whether at the realm of tort or at the realm of human rights law, law adjudication itself. If I can recall, I think it was Genjo and Akirenti, a 1990 Supreme Court decision, which arose from the realm of tort, where a young girl, 5 years or thereabout, was knocked down, killed by a truck that belonged to Nigerian Brewers Limited in 1973. The case rose as far as the Supreme Court. At the first court of trial, the father of the deceased girl was awarded 25,000 naira. 25,000 naira was strong money in the 70s. And the MBL appealed to the Court of Appeal. The money was reduced to 1,000 naira. And subsequently, when it rose as far as the Supreme Court held that the parent of the girl, the father of the girl, was not entitled to any compensation or damage. On the basis that the principle in the field of tort, for example, somebody approaching the court against a tortfeasor must have to establish, what the life of the deceased, would have become if he were alive, or if he or she were alive. would he or she be wealthy? Would he or she be in that position to take care of his or her parents? You know,
well, what happened to the rights to life? Because I mean, nobody can determine that. There's no oracle that can say whether the person wouldn't have even become the president of the country.
So that's a very important question of race. So that's why I said I'm worried in terms of the approaches that the lawyers will take. If they go down the route of the law of tort, I see them encountering all sort of difficulties. Straightforward, they should go. They should follow the FREP rules, go to the higher courts and enforce the right of Nigerians who were killed by the airstrikes. How much or what amount of damages or compensations that courts can grant, will depend on the arguments that are made before the court. But it's a good thing. But it's also important that while they are considering going to court, they should also insist on an impartial and independent judicial panel, headed by a judge with impeccable character, who distinguished himself, in the judicial service of our country. We don't want a panel that will go there and whitewash, what has happened in Kaduna State.
All right, Jonathan, what's your response to this group of northern lawyers who are threatening to sue the federal government and, of course, the military in this instance?
Yes, I think suing the federal government or suing the military is in order. But I think our fears are well funded because we have a judiciary that we cannot actually boast of. Between you and I know that as it is now, the snare approach in the judiciary system, you can take a case there and maybe in the next 10, 15 years, the matter is still ongoing. And so these people, these families, even those in the hospitals, I don't pray for so, but some of them even lost their lives because of frustrations and all of that, front and back. And I think what you were saying today on the screen, even by the vice president, is just like what I call the media image laundering of the government, just to get something.
Issues of throwing money at every problem.
Of course, so that everything can just die at that moment, and thereafter forget about it. It's a typical nature of our politicians. Once they just need something from you, or when they want to get their attention, they throw money in the air, and once they get these things, it's over. So the groups are actually on the right track. However, they must begin to learn from history, and history have over the time repeated itself. Why am I saying this? The Kaduna train attack, we are all together in the studio. We discussed these issues. There are families that were involved, also paying ransoms to some of these, bandits just to get their family loved ones rescued. The federal government could not do anything about that. The Baptist school boys issues that just happened, even the last boy that was not released, and later some months ago, just last 2 months was released, was with the effort of the one reverend father and also the mother who sold some of the properties just to get the son released, to get the son released from captivity. You see, Leah Sharibu is still a mystery. The families, I really don't know the level of compensations that they have actually given to the family. Recall the case of Deborah, who was murdered by just some of these young boys in school. It was even a cleric that took it upon himself to get shelter for the families. Like I told you, the victims of the 2002 cantonment, the Keja cantonment, up to date, the families have not been compensated. If you remember,
are you saying that we should all give up? Is that what you're saying? Because this is a new government. Those things happened under the previous government. Now, this is the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Government is a continuity.
Shouldn't we have something different?
I hope, because he tagged his the budget and tagged his administration renewed hope. But unfortunately, this renewed hope have actually frustrated so many Nigerians, considering the current economic hardship, the hunger in the land, and so many people losing their jobs.
Yeah, so but I mean, you saw the vice president being deployed by President Tinubu and all of that. Shouldn't that be sort of a sign that President Tinubu really means what he said? That everybody who took part in this would have to face the law if they are found wanting.
We had a Jonathan who was at Janya visiting virtually all the attacks or the scene of crimes in this country. We had a President Buhari who said shoot on sight. You know, when you see anyone carrying AK-47 illegally and all of that. We didn't see anybody that was shoot on sight. We still have, you know, headsmen carrying AK-47 parading. So this is just to visit the place, visit the scene of crime, throw money at them, and then when they are gone, it's over. This is just the typical nature of our people. So I am telling you, this should be on record. We are already in Christmas. Excuses will be given. But let us see that from now to January or February or March, we should see who and who will be investigated, who and who will be prosecuted, who and who will go to jail for this. We have not seen this happening over the years.
All right, Mahmud, shouldn't we have had a panel being set up now? Because it's just talk.
Our panels is not actually, you know, if we had to have a panel, we should have independent Nigerians like me. And like the lawyer have I've highlighted, individual Nigerians, people that have credibility, that can be in those panel, that can be in this panel to say, look, Mr. Man, this is not how it's supposed to be. Now the military also have ethics, but in 24 hours also, let's say this is about over 24 hours now. They have not issued a statement whether this man is physically or mentally fit, and that this investigation is ongoing.
That's the person that gave the order.
Of course,
there's the issue of collective responsibility.
The commander by NAN should be at least be investigated, be prosecuted. Look, this can happen between 48 hours when the military is ready to work.
Let's just allow Mahmud to come in.
I see two problems here. Two problems. One, Nigerians are buffeted by terrorists, bandits, kidnappers, and where we run away from those who are buffeting us, we're at the risk of being killed by state institutions, flying drones. That's one. Two, recall when I spoke to you from the UK a few months ago or last year, I talked about the non-securitization of the Nigerian citizen. Here, if the state consider the citizen as a subject of national security, the state will strive to protect the citizen. But we don't have that situation here. If we do have it, what we are doing is a review of what happened last week. As we speak, no judicial panel has been empaneled by the state, which tells you the unseriousness of this government. They are unserious. Look, this thing happened last week. A serious government will be proactive, will seriously respond to the problem by empaneling Nigerians to look at what happened in Kaduna State. Now, if refusal to empanel is why we see politicians turning Igabi local government into shrines, into groves, into mecca of political goodwill.
Okay. So how do we prevent this from happening next time again? We've seen the compensation plan of the government. But as a citizen, how do we ensure that when you see a military aircraft running across you, you are not also running? So that, I mean, you are not sure whether it's for good or whatever. How do we ensure that there's that confidence that's
one disastrous airstrike, too many. I think the military will have to look within itself and begin to ask questions and provide answers to the questions. What are we not doing right? How is our intelligence? What's the synergy between the military and the Air Force and the DSS? Look, the Department of State Security should be involved in internal national security, coordinated by the Office of the National Security Advisor. What I see here is lack of coordination between these institutions.
Yeah, I mean, you hear them actually say that, look, gentlemen, this has happened, let's move on. The military is there for you and all of that. But how do we
cannot move on because we are talking of 85 lives here. And there's no assurance
we'll be moving on.
There's no assurance.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. As a human rights lawyer, does it look like our government and our politicians don't place premium on human lives in this country?
I just answered it. The non-securitization of the Nigerian citizen. There's no premium. If you recognize the citizen as a subject of national security, you place premium on his or her life. As we speak, we have, I think, 14 students, 14 coppers, who are in the hideouts or camps.
In Zamfara, who were abducted.
Abducted.
Over 100.
No. After how many months, nobody's talking about them. He spoke about the young boy of the Baptist, whatever. You know, once your ward or your kid or your daughter or your husband, your niece, you know, is abducted by terrorists or bandits or kidnappers in this country, it becomes your problem. Your problem.
Yeah, I mean,
but one solution, I think Nigerians must become active citizens. You mentioned the train disaster in which people were killed. It was a public train. If somebody had taken an action in thought against the Nigerian Railway Corporation, paying damages and compensation will teach them lessons on the need for them to organize and make their operations top-notch.
All right, Onoja, what do we do to ensure that when citizens see military aircraft coming or an unmanned aerial vehicle coming, they will know that it's actually going to the right place and it's not coming to their houses, football fields, or communities or something like that, so that, I mean, people will trust their military once again?
You see, just within the Federal Capital Territory, if you're going to see the military have some show-off on the streets, or even maybe a test run of some gadgets around some areas, you will see as a text message or even a WhatsApp that there's going to be so and so areas. And so Nigerians, please don't be panic. Now you have details of Nigerians. You've told us that you're going to use the NIN as a way of getting real Nigerians. So you really have database of good Nigerians. And then you can send this text message directly to those that you felt you have the data.
Well, in the areas of operation, I mean, the military wouldn't want to do that because the civilians can actually sell the information to terrorists.
But excuse me, this is the way to actually have the trust of Nigerians again, as to where you can secure that confidence. Because if they keep seeing this flying around the areas, they will tell you another one is coming. And you understand it? So also the Nigerian military, they need this good intelligence and proper training to distinguish between unarmed civilians and also combatants in a battle space. So if these are not actually distinguished, we continue to keep having these drones attacks and mishaps over and over again. And the reason why I say this is that you talk about national security. Our intelligence, we've lost sense of intelligence. And the National Security Advisor is not doing enough to coordinating the security architecture. You see, coordinating these people is beyond attending NLC meetings or following Mr. President to countries just to get his attention.
Talking about
So if you have, look, these have actually exposed them, and it shows that there's no capacity. Look, if we have a country where a national security advisor exists between now, like last week, between last week and now, we should have the chief of army staff reported to the national security advisor full details, full report of how this has happened. But there
was a meeting at the villa where we saw all the security heads
all is just
actually meeting
with the president.
This
is just a handshake and then take tea and go. Nothing has actually happened.
For the camera.
This has not happened. Nothing is happening. Beyond having a handshake, take some tea, share some money, see how we can solve the problems, and you go. They have turned, like you said, we have turned that area to a show of 2027 because so many people want to go and get sympathy from these people. So to me, the military needs a basic understanding of how intelligence should be, and also, like I said, distinguish between your targets and also the civilians. So
now, very quickly, as we try to round off, have these constant accidents done a huge damage to the image of our military in the eyes of the international community?
Of course, it has done a great injury. Have caused a great injury to or damage to the image of the Nigerian military force. Because, for instance, if we begin to itemize or begin to analyze one by one the rules of engagement as to the international best practices, we have seen that over the years our military have violated all of these rules. And if that has been, then what else do you expect the diplomats that reside in the Federal Capital Territory to look at? Look, from the day we have, look, this is the Federal Capital Territory. Less than 32 kilometers from the presidential villa to Kuje prison. Less than 30 kilometers from the Yellow House, what we call the DSS headquarters, to Kuje Prison. We have also the Almighty War College Assembly here, less than 33 kilometers to Kuje Prison. We have the NIA, less than 30 kilometers to Kuje Prison. We have all of these guys assembling in the Federal Capital Territory. We don't have man drones to go around, or man drones to go around and supervise where people invaded this place, you know, our correctional centers, free inmates, even had time to have prayer sessions and give them money. That alone have even exposed us, and it is a shame that we don't have a good security. Even the whole villa don't have a good security, because we are talking about a villa that resides in the heart of the Federal Capital Territory.
Yeah, I mean,
and so
that's also one report that Nigerians are still waiting for. What happened? So
this has not even actually been investigated, and so I can go on and on.
Well, maybe it was investigated, but the report is yet to be made known.
Look, there is no investigation, there's no report that can be made public that I, Jonathan Onoja, will not tell you. These have gone, you know, so just one of them, arrested some time ago. They say, oh, the media was everywhere, went agog, that they've arrested one of the Kuje escapees and loved. So nothing happens. You see, we have a porous Federal Capital Territory. No digital checkpoints from Abaji, from Kaduna, from Nasarawa. And so when we are talking about having a country, when we don't have even our Federal Capital Territory saved, is it Kaduna? Is it Benue? Is it Lokoja? Where are we talking about? That's going to be
all right. As we try to round off this conversation, I mean, we also need to know that we need to secure this country. Absolutely. For the international community to have more faith in us that we're able to win the war against terrorism. Very quickly, as we try to round off, there's this tendency among politicians who are in government, like the current APC-led federal government, to just say, look, don't worry, after 1 week or 2 weeks, this issue will go away. Do you think that's going to happen over this Kaduna issue, as we try to round off very quickly?
Well, quickly, unfortunately, I'll say yes. Bad news buries bad news. And Nigeria has become a quarter of rapid or center for rapid news. Once what bad news comes up, the old bad news naturally dies.
Fades away.
Fades away. Fades away. And that's the unfortunate thing. But because what has happened in Kaduna State has now been politicized, has also been ethnically framed, I don't see it go away, you know, in the next few weeks, except the government takes concrete action, set up an independent judicial panel, let its sittings be open. But I know that at the latter stage, there will be questions about military confidentiality of operations and all that. And perhaps, looking down the road as well, the report of the judicial panel, if the government decides to establish a panel one, should also be made public. And that's learning from the NSAS, 2020, where judicial panels 27 were set up across our country. To date, it's only Lagos State that has been courageous enough to put its report in the public space, because activists within the judicial panel space, uploaded the report onto the social media. So the hands of...
all right, very quickly, because we just have to go now. Yeah. In 30 seconds, do you think that the compensation plans are enough? Yes or no?
We don't even know how much. To me, the compensation is not even enough, because the compensation have actually been made public. Yeah. They intend to build schools and all of that. But those that have lost their lives, what is going to happen? So in 1 second, I want to say that our political actors or gladiators need to reduce what I term oboche in my language. It means pomposity, arrogancy in the midst of this, in the midst of unprofessionalism. So we need to bring down our heads calm and also be true to the cause of fighting terrorism.
All right, gentlemen, most thank you immensely for helping us to understand the issues at stake. And it's so unfortunate we couldn't take the issues of the NMPP due to one issue or the other. But of course, I think our viewers would have really enjoyed this conversation. We must thank Jonathan Onoja, who's a security consultant and, of course, a public affairs commentator, for helping us to understand the issues at stake. And, of course, Abdul Mahmud, our own human rights lawyer, who's always known as the great oracle, for helping us to, you know, deep into what the thinking will be about the rights of the dead and, of course, those who are living right now. It's on this note that we want to thank you for staying with us all through this time. And we want to say this, the much that we have on this week. Stay with us as we bring you another edition. I'm Somna Sambo. Thank you so much.